Welcome again. My name is Claire Sarowski. I am the lead for energy at Rural Development here at U.S. Department of Agriculture, and have the exciting job of getting to work on the REAP program. So I will turn it over to Brenda and then on to Deb and Jobette.
Thank you, Claire. Brenda Heinen. I'm the Western Regional Energy Coordinator, and I cover 13 states out west, and I'll be presenting today. Deb?
Thanks, Brenda. My name is Deb Yoakum. I am the Southern RBCS Regional Energy Coordinator, and I'm also acting in the operations branch currently. Is JoBeth on?
Hi, good afternoon. I am JoBeth DeLauder, and I'm currently serving as the Acting Climate Advisor for Rural Business Cooperative Service. And just want to thank you all for joining today and taking part in this wonderful program.
Thanks, guys. So I'm just going to get us started a little bit. I just wanted to open by saying, first of all, you all have a really cool job. It is not often the case that we can provide funding for technical assistance for a program, and the REAP program is an amazing program. As you all know, it allows farmers, ag producers, rural small businesses to actually build their own or acquire their own clean energy on farm, on business. And when you start digging into the stories of REAP projects and seeing the actual impact of these projects, it is really exciting. We've got rural small businesses, small farmers, others who are reducing their energy costs by 30% in some cases or more. And this is a really big deal. If you are a ag producer, small ag producer, or a rural small business, reducing your costs, your energy costs by a third or more is really significant. It can be the difference between being in the red for the year and being able to hire a new person. And so this program is really impactful. It is reducing costs for farmers and communities across the U.S. And so you have a really cool job in that you can provide technical assistance to folks to apply for this program. And one reason we wanted to have this webinar is to make sure that you are excited about doing this job and that you have the tools you need to get it underway. We've seen that a lot of REAP tag providers, technical assistance providers, haven't really gotten going in a big way. And we want you out there. We want you helping people apply to this program, particularly, distressed and disadvantaged folks who don't maybe have the resources to apply for the program, don't know how to do it, but it will have a huge impact on their operations, on their ability to, again, stay in the green and, be the best farm or small business they can be. So I wanted to make sure that you're excited about your work because it really is impactful. And then I wanted to highlight underutilized technologies. Most of the projects that we've seen come in through REAP are solar projects, and that is great. But there are a lot of other technologies out there. There's wind, there's geothermal, there's biogas, there's all sorts of other options. And, again, folks are just less familiar with those kinds of projects. But they are great and sometimes, make a lot more sense than solar in different contexts. And so, Congress has made it clear to us that they wanted to make sure that we are supporting what we call underutilized technologies, which in this case is basically almost everything other than solar, renewable projects, almost anything other than solar in the REAP program. So again, there are great opportunities for wind and geothermal and other technologies to play a big role here. And we actually launched an initiative called the RAISE Initiative. We will put it in the chat. And we launched an initiative called the RAISE Initiative to try to bring more attention to the opportunity for wind being a solution, to small scale wind, to other kinds of technologies as well. And so Brenda and our team have been working hard to get the word out there about other underutilized technologies. And so would love for you guys, as you're doing your technical assistance, to make sure that you're not just immediately saying, okay, let's do another solar project, but to really think about what makes sense for that operation and help them think through what makes sense. And we have technical resources to assist you even in doing that if you would like, from the the National Renewable Energy Lab, NREL at Department of Energy, and other things like that. So Deb and Brenda are going to talk more about underutilized technologies, but I did want to flag that and encourage folks to really think about underutilized technologies. We would love to see more underutilized technology projects in the REAP program. So I am going to do two housekeeping items. The two housekeeping items I was asked to raise are, one, if you have a question or want to say something, just raise your hand. You can use that raise your hand function. And we will do Q&A at the end. So please use the raise your hand function. Or if you're more comfortable writing in, you can use the Q&A function. And so please utilize those. The chat function is just one way. We'll be able to send you resources and things like that, but otherwise the chat won't be live. So again, please use that Q&A function if you want to ask a question or have some feedback. That's where to do that. Or again, just raise your hand during the Q&A session. We love to see people come on screen and ask questions directly. So I hope you stay really engaged here. We are putting this on again to make sure that you can do your jobs and help people really transform their lives. So I'm going to turn it over to Brenda now. And again, thank you for your work. We're really excited to see more REAP projects come from your technical assistance.
Thank you, Claire. Hi, everybody. So I'm going to start here talking about the topics that we're going to cover. The first half of the call is going to explain what is required in the REAP, RES, EEI applications. And then the second half of the webinar, we're going to discuss reporting and reimbursement requests, reimbursement requirements. So these are the topics: funding opportunities for underutilized technologies, requirements of a complete REAP application, funding provisions, agency review and quarterly competition process, tag reimbursements, reporting, and project deliverables. So we have a whole agenda here to try to cover in a short period of time. First of all, we'd like to explain what the underutilized technology definition is. It is renewable energy technologies which make up less than 20% of the total grant dollars obligated at the end of the fiscal year. We use 2 fiscal years prior to the current year. So fiscal year 22 award data was used to determine what technologies are going to be eligible for fiscal year 24. No single technology may receive more than 50% of the total funding available each fiscal year, excepting years in which all underutilized technology applications have been processed and applications remain unfunded, with funding still available in the set-aside. All renewable energy system applications, except for solar, are considered an underutilized technology. Solar with storage is not an underutilized technology. Also, this does not include energy efficiency improvement type applications. EEI is not an underutilized technology. And we have great news for the rural small businesses and the agricultural producers that are submitting REAP applications that will be using underutilized technologies. We have now added an underutilized technology competitions. It's with an S, we'll have more than one. So these applications are no longer limited to a final national office pooling, which would happen once a year. Competitions will happen on an ongoing basis. Those are for complete and eligible applications. So this is new and exciting news. What is a complete application? An application that contains all the parts necessary for the agency to determine applicant and project eligibility, the financial feasibility and technical merit of the project. And it contains sufficient information to determine a priority score for the application. So think of it as a two-step process. Were all the required application documents submitted? Is the information sufficient, and can the agency determine eligibility, feasibility, technical merit, and scoring of the application? Please note the date of the complete application may differ from the date of the application was received in the office. A complete application includes a 4280-3 form. This is a 3-tier system, so you will either choose A, B, or C, depending on the total project cost of the application. And we do have a checklist that we will drop in the chat, and you can use this when you're submitting applications to determine if you're sending a complete application. It will be extremely helpful if the applications come in complete and solid, so that when our states get the applications, they can touch the files once and get them reviewed and scored. And the checklist is being made available to assist you in your reviews. So in addition to the 4280-3 form, you will also need to submit the standard form 424, which is the application for federal assistance. You'll also need to submit the SF 424C, the budget information, and the SF 424D. All three of these need to be submitted. If one of them is missing, it is an incomplete application. And please make sure that the applicant is signing the application forms. It can't be the grant writer. Another item to make it a complete application, it's important to start the SAM registration process early. Sometimes this will take time to obtain this unique entity identification number through the SAM.gov system. The SAM registrations are free. Make sure when the SAM registrations are filed that the legal name of the applicant entity and the tax ID or the social security number identified on the SF 424 match what you're entering for the SAM registration. So for example, if your name is Sam Hunt on the SF 424, it must be registered in SAM as Sam Hunt, not as Hunt Brother Farms. Also note, when you go in to complete the SAM registration, there are 3 options to file for a UEI and registration. Please note, if you obtain the UEI, the unique entity identification number only, that this is not adequate for a REAP application. You must complete the entire process. If the SAM registration is not complete, the application is considered an incomplete application unless you've made SAM attempts and it's something outside of the applicant's control that they can't get a SAM registration. Maybe the SAM system's down. It can't be simply I didn't have time. I didn't do it. Reasonable attempts and documentation needs to be provided in the application if the SAM registration is not done. And you can talk to and contact your state energy coordinator if you have problems with SAM registrations to see if the application can be considered complete or not. In addition, we need detailed bids or contracts, and it must be for the total project cost. Any fees required for the project should be included. Major system components and price per unit as applicable should be identified in the bids and in contracts. Include labor and installation cost. Note in the application if you have any ineligible cost. So if there's some cost incurred prior to submitting an application, such as engineering, or maybe there's a deposit that was made, all of those costs are not eligible and should be marked as ineligible cost. Lifetime system monitoring fees is not an eligible project cost, nor is contingency. Certification by a licensed professional engineer required at design, installation, monitoring, testing, prior to commercial operation and project completion is required for any projects greater than $1 million. The amount and source of funds needs to be a firm commitment. Documentation needs to be received in order to receive points. Firm commitments can be, for example, a bank statement or a loan approval letter. The approval letter needs to identify that it's for a windmill project, and these are the rates and terms and the dollar amount to be considered to receive points in the scoring process. Renewable energy resource documentation. This can be found in Section B of Appendix B or Section C of Appendix C. There's two different appendixes depending on the total project cost of the renewable energy system that you're proposing. In the presentation, we have added the regulation references in the 4280B. So these are quick references of why these are required. And if you want to read about more information or gather more information about each of these sections, please refer to our regulation. There's a section in the application regarding technical merit. You will need to have a technical report. The 4280-3 forms have sections for the technical report information, but in addition to the 4280-3, you'll need attachments. There is a vendor installer certification for projects that are less than 80,000, and this certification should only be included in the applications when the total project costs are less than 80,000. There is a certification for RES, which is our renewable energy systems, and there's a certification for EEI, which is our energy efficiency improvements. All projects must have technical merit. A full technical report is required for EEI projects, hydrogen, anaerobic digesters, biogas, biomass, ocean energy, geothermal electric generation, hybrid applications, and renewable energy systems with storage components. All other technologies must provide a resource assessment, information for a simple payback, historical energy consumption compared to the amount to be generated, and demonstrate the system will perform over the useful life in a cost-effective manner. Here is listed appendixes in our regulations, and the dollar amounts of when each of these is applicable is identified here. In the application, please include the equipment specifications sheets and warranties. So if it's a solar array, include the PV modules, include the racking, include the inverter, for example. Energy and byproduct sales documentation, the quantity and price. For us to be able to score simple payback, we need this documentation in the file submitted in the application. So it might be identified in a power purchase agreement, a net metering agreement, a utility energy crediting policy, byproduct sales documentation, or conventional fuel alternatives for a new facility or direct use applications. Energy audits. If it's greater than a $200,000 total project cost, you will need an energy audit for an energy efficiency type project. An energy assessment can be submitted for projects less than 200,000. And again, we have the regulation references for you. Required documentation can be found in Section B for the energy audit and Section C for the energy assessment of Appendix A. The energy audit should include a situation report, a potential improvement description, a technical analysis, and qualifications of the report author. Historical utility bills also need to be submitted so we can score the simple payback. Energy efficiency improvement projects must include the historical utility bills. And when the electric bills are submitted, please be sure to give us the pages that identify the per kilowatt cost that list them all out. If you submit just the first page that just has the summary of the bill amount, this is not sufficient. To be complete, we need at least a minimum of the most recent 12 consecutive months, or you can send in up to 60 months if needed. And make sure these are clear copies when you send them in and that they're consecutive. If they're not, this is taking a lot of time for us to get these applications reviewed. Utility bills from the same time period for all fuel types should be submitted. Shared meter documentation. So we do have a lot of shared meter situations where we have the agricultural producer maybe shares a meter with a residence. Please note that the agricultural producer of a small business needs to show that at least 50% or more of the energy to be proposed, the proposed energy to be generated must benefit the business or farm. Otherwise, the applicant can certify that they're going to install a second meter. If they're going to have a shared meter situation, we need documentation, a list of assumptions. How did you arrive what the historical energy use was for the house versus the farm, for example? A feasibility study by an independent qualified consultant for a renewable energy system when applicable. Not all projects need a feasibility study. Please work with your state energy coordinator, but typically a feasibility study is going to be required if it's a new startup venture operation or it's a riskier technology. Maybe if it's an anaerobic digester or an ethanol plant or biodiesel facility, projects that are more complex are probably going to require an independent feasibility study. Another area of weakness in our applications that we're finding is we're not getting complete financial statements. When your projects are $200,000 and greater, we need complete sets of financial statements. We need assumptions that were used to develop the pro forma financial statements. A lot of our files are missing that applications, so we have to send them back as incomplete. Financial information needs to be provided for the total operations of the applicant entity in all entities it controls or the entity or entities that control the applicant. So we're going to need 3 years of historical financial statements, and that will include 3 years of balance sheets and 3 years of income statements. The applications must contain current financial statements dated within 90 days of submission of the application. We'll need a current balance sheet and a current income statement. And then we'll need 2 years of pro formas. Pro forma financial statements have to include balance sheets, income statements, and cash flows. A file I recently received had a balance sheet that had 2 lines on it for figures. Please note we need complete sets, and tax returns are not sufficient as financial statements. Tax returns can be used as a starting point to create historical financial statements. Another section of our application is the environmental information. We have an environmental checklist, which you should use as a starting point that will ask questions, and you'll need to fill it out and then attach some maps. Here's a note: if ground disturbance not adjacent to an existing structure and or building that's 50 years or old or older, contact your energy coordinator. Please think about the environmental review early on in the process when you start thinking about a project. If there's going to be ground disturbance or you're affecting a 50-year-old building or near a historical property, the review process is going to take longer in our office. So work with your state energy coordinator if you have questions, but start this early on in the process. You'll need to submit site photos, an aerial map showing the building, the lot, the exact location of the project. Describe any ground disturbance, such as trenching or electrical connections. What is the age of the building or buildings surrounding the project? Will trees be cleared? These are some environmental things to start thinking about when you're working with different technologies. Now I'm going to move on to funding provisions. With the IRA funding, the the IRA Act, we have grants now up to 50% of the federal share. So all energy efficiency projects, renewable energy systems that do not produce greenhouse gases, projects located in designated energy communities, and projects submitted by tribal entities are all eligible up to a 50% federal share, a grant due to the IRA Act that was passed. All other projects that do not qualify for the 50% federal share can ask for up to a 25% grant. Applicants may request less than the maximum. If you request a $20,000 or less grant, these application requests will compete in a set aside until June 30th of each year. Funding requirements on renewable energy systems. If you're coming in for a 25% or a 50% grant, there is a minimum grant request. So for a 25% grant, it's $2,500 on the renewable energy side. 50%, it's $5,000. The maximum grant is $1 million for renewable energy systems. And energy efficiency improvement, the minimum grant request for a 25% grant is $1,500. 50% for $3,000, and the maximum grant is $500,000. We do have some farm bill funds that we carried over, and we're working on a new farm bill. But right now we do have IRA money, and applicants can either ask for 25% or 50%. In this slide, we want to talk about the award limit. The maximum award that an applicant can receive is $1.5 million. The applicant can apply for one EEI project at the maximum of $500,000 and one renewable energy system at a maximum of $1 million. This applies to affiliated entities as if they applied for one application. Their maximum is 1.5. So here's an example. If John Doe filed and was selected for an RES award at the grant amount of $1 million, and then they also apply as Doe Enterprise LLC, which is owned 100% by John Doe, and this Doe Enterprise was also selected for an RES award of $1 million. John Doe, because they are affiliated, they must choose one of the RES applications to receive a $1 million in maximum federal grant assistance. I also wanted to mention that we do have a REAP guaranteed loan program as well. And applicants can ask for up to 75% of the eligible project costs. The minimum loan is $5,000. The maximum loan amount is $25 million. It's not a direct loan program, it's a guaranteed loan program, and the applicant would have to work with a lender or a bank, financial institution of their choice. And the applicant negotiates the rates and terms with the lender. Just know that if projects need the other 50% funding, there's a possibility they could look for a guaranteed loan from Rural Development as well. Okay, I'm going to move into REAP application reviews and quarterly competition process. The REAP application process, the application is filed by the applicant. The agency date stamps it upon receipt. Then we issue a receipt for service, and an application received letter is issued to the applicant. The application is reviewed for completeness and eligibility, and the environmental review begins for both NEPA and Section 106 clearance. The application status is updated to the applicant. Complete and eligible applications compete in the quarter they become complete. So throughout the process, when applications are received, we send a series of letters during our review process to notify the applicant of the progress of the application. Communication is key. So this first letter, what it tells the applicant, it advises the applicant is, hey, the application's been received. It advises of the required environmental review and to not start construction. And it advises to not incur cost until the agency notification of a complete application has been received. The application status. After review of the application, the agency will notify the applicant. So once we've told you, hey, we have the application, now we're going to start the review process and we're going to determine one of the 4 following items. We're either going to say it's a complete application and we've gotten through our environmental, and then we'll provide you a complete application date and we'll tell you, you may begin the project, but there's no funding guarantee. The applications haven't been completed yet. Or we'll tell you it's a complete application and it's pending NEPA. We might have, working with SHPO and TIPO and doing newspaper publications, and we'll tell you do not start construction. Or we'll notify you it's an incomplete application. Here's a list of items that's going to be required to make it a complete application. Or unfortunately, it just might not be eligible. It will be an ineligible application, and we'll tell you why in the letter that we provide. Applications are received year-round. Complete and eligible applications compete in the following quarter. So right now we're in June, so April through June. At the end of June 30th, states are busy reviewing the applications they received in the following quarter. Incomplete applications, the applicant will be notified of the missing items. In the letter, we will tell them no further action is being taken on your file. It is the applicant's responsibility to submit the additional items by the agency deadline. We will not follow up with them after we issue an incomplete letter. We just don't have time. And if the applicant resubmits the missing items, the agency will review those additional items. A complete application date is the date all items for a complete application have been received. So that's where it comes in. You might have an application receive date different than the complete date. Applications that remain incomplete on July 1st must be withdrawn unless there's a processing extension that may be published in a Federal Register. Okay, for the next half of the presentation, I'm going to move into now what's required of you, the TAG recipients. And we're first going to talk about TAG reimbursements. All of you should have executed a financial assistance agreement. And once that agreement was executed, you have 36 months to perform the work. This is called your period of performance. You need to follow your approved scope of work and the budget and the tasks that you identified in your application. If you choose to change any of those items, you must be pre-approved by the agency. You can request a monthly reimbursement. And to do that, you will need to send in a complete signed SF-270 form and attached supporting documentation. The agency may require additional documentation to ensure that it's in compliance with 2 CFR 200. Grant funds will be transferred to you electronically. It's called an electronic funds transfer using SF, a standard form 3881. This will establish the bank account of where you want the funds to be placed. The agency must be able to track all the expenses and ensure they fit within the approved scope. Must have detailed description of the work performed including hours worked and wage rates to track time. It may include an employee's pay stub or timesheets. Please provide receipts and evidence of payment, such as credit card statements or canceled checks, along with the payment date. For mileage, use the current federal mileage rate and include the traveler's name, the number of miles traveled, location, and reason for travel. Indirect costs should be prorated and limited to 5%, the 5% maximum that was identified in the Federal Register. Whoops. Tag expenses should be directly related to providing the technical assistance to the agricultural producer or the rural small business. We should be paying for expenses such as writing REAP grants, working with vendors to get project bids, completing renewable energy site assessments, conducting energy audits or assessments, SAM registration assistance. These are just a few items I pulled out of some of the scope of works that you can be providing. Ineligible expenses include things such as purchasing office furniture, like furnishing your office with desks, raffle prize baskets at conferences, any conflict of interest if you're using tag funds to write a grant for your own affiliated company. Those kind of expenses could be problematic, and the ones that I have listed are, but there may be more. We highly recommend, if you're new to providing technical assistance using federal grant funds, to take a 2 CFR training course. I know there's some accounting firms and other companies out there that provide this type of training. I put in the slide here a regulation reference to 2 CFR 200 and concentrate and review the cost principles, specifically under subpart E. It will talk about, costs that are allowable, reasonable, and allocable. Please check this out. We don't want any unauthorized assistance where we've approved something and then we have to come back out and collect funds. This is an example of a reimbursement request. We need a summary of the request. So basically, what's your budget? What are the expenses? This is what your original budget was. Did we make any kind of changes? And then the percentages of each of the categories. And then we need to know what you're asking for in draw 1. So in the scope of work, the budget, all in the application, this stuff should have been identified so that when you're asking for monthly reimbursements, you can have all of this information identified. You should have tasks written in your application. And then when we reimburse, we want to know, well, what did you do for draw 1? Were you writing grant applications? Were you assisting with SAM registrations? And so forth. And then we want to know, well, who's the staff? What's their title? If they're the project coordinator and their name is Mr. Jones, what's the rate? What's the hourly rate? Then the next slide will tell us it's still part of draw 1. Tell us what did you use the funds on for that month that you're asking for reimbursement on? If Mr. Jones worked 18 hours and he gets paid $40 an hour, tell us what he did for those 18 hours. Give us a timesheet. These are the days they work. These are the times in and out. He traveled 30 miles to Loon Lake to do an audit. Be very detailed, descriptive of what you're performing in this grant. Basically, you're creating the audit trail. So then here are 5 categories. I just made this up. It's fictitious. I put wages, energy audits and assessments, training and travel. When you traveled, maybe you had to stay at a hotel and that costs $90. Make sure you're keeping a copy of the receipt. And all of that should be attached to this request. If you're traveling and claiming meals, you'll need your receipts of your meals that you're purchasing or you're going to a wind conference, you will have a copy of the invoice. Okay, moving on to reporting and project deliverables. Semi-annual reports using the SF 425 and a project performance report needs to be submitted for the periods ending March 31st and September 30th. These reports are due 30 days after the reporting period ends. Include deliverables for the agency review, such as how many grant applications were written, how many energy audits were completed, how many renewable energy site assessments were completed. We'll also need a final report is due 90 days after project completion. And then there's an outcome project performance report due 1 year after project completion. You can find this information in the letter of conditions that you agreed to, and also the financial assistance agreement that was signed. This is a copy of an SF 425 form that will need to be completed every 6 months. The agency has created you a project performance report, and it's an Excel spreadsheet that has like 3 or 4 tabs on the bottom, but it wants to know, it's asking questions like what objectives were made, or accomplishments were met, what's planned for the next quarter. The state energy coordinator can give you a copy of this if you don't already have it. One item that we would highly recommend is start early and gathering this information up front. Every recipient that you assist will need to be documented on the project performance report. So just for example, the initial submission of a report could be you worked with John Doe and it's for a solar site assessment grant writing when they applied to REAP, and then the subsequent report could be, hey, they got an award, received an award. This is the information you'll have to include in these reports, and I would just start doing them right away when you're assisting clients. This is an outcome project performance report. This is going to ask, and it's just a snippet of the copy of the form. There's more on the bottom here, but I just gave a little sampling of what we're going to be asking for. How many applications did you write? How many were awarded? How many site assessments did you do? How many technical reports did you write? How many SAM registrations? Things of that nature will have to be reported. Again, another section that I would gather as I'm assisting clients is their race and ethnicity data. And this spreadsheet that we created will help you gather that as you assist clients, ultimate recipients. And then the last item I believe I have here for you is technology training, save the dates. In partnership with the National Renewable Energy Labs, we are providing technology training. So if you want to learn more about how to put a wind application together, what to look for, we're having this webinar on June 17th, and then we'll have solar with storage on July 17th. And then there will be a whole host of other series coming, so you can look out for those. At this time, I'm at the end of the presentation. Thank you for attending today. And I wanted to also note on here that there is a list of state energy coordinators that you should work with. At this time, I believe we still have time to open it up for questions. If somebody wanted to come online, raise your hand.
Thank you, Brenda. We have Brad Morton in the waiting room. Sir, if you'd like to unmute yourself and ask your question.
Question we had is, do you need the spec sheets for the racking for renewable energy systems?
We asked for it, and we do see it provided in a lot of the applications. So yes, if you can provide the racking, the modules, and the inverter.
Also, bills, what do you need that's not on the first page? On the bill, on the electric bills?
Yeah, so sometimes, electric bill will be 4 pages. And on the first page, it might just say, this is your June bill, you owe, $300. We need all the detailed page that says, hey, I have a fixed meter charge at $30 every month. Then you might have off-peak rates and on-peak rates, demand rates, low-income assistance programs. There's different things that get detailed on like the second or third page. And we take those bills and analyze them to come up with an average per kilowatt price for our payback calculation.
That information is all on the first page of our bills.
Okay, then first page is good for you.
One other question we had was the reimbursements for marketing. I didn't see any information about that.
Okay, I would need to know more. I mean, if marketing's in your scope of work and your budget, there's a possibility that those expenses are eligible. We'd have to review it pretty much on a, I would have to see the documentation to know if it's something that we can reimburse or understand the question of what we're trying to reimburse for marketing. Excuse me.
Would marketing be incorporated underneath the work on getting bids? Because part of getting bids is marketing.
Okay, so getting bids from 3 contractors?
Getting, well, we get the bids out, but I guess to be able to provide a quote to do the work, to find out how much a job is going to cost. Does that
Okay.
make sense?
Deb, do you understand the context of the question? Could you
Yeah,
assist?
so I guess the question is, if the tag provider is going out to different vendors to get quotes, is that a cost that would be eligible to be reimbursed? Is that correct?
Not exactly. Say, we will write a grant for an applicant. But to get the applicant, we need to provide the bid to an applicant to know that they're interested in getting an RES. If they're interested in getting RES, we can provide a quote to them. So is getting the opportunity to bid for an RES included in the marketing to do that, included in that section?
Yeah, we may have to have an offline conversation because I'm not sure we're on the same page. If you're a tag recipient and you're helping ag producers and small businesses and you're pulling together the bids for the REAP application, that's definitely something that we could do. But generalized marketing, it gets a little sticky there because we truly do want to see that the funds are going directly towards individual REAP applications that are going to come in for funding.
Okay. One other question here is, will this webinar recording be available, especially since we went through some of these spec sheets and our spreadsheets kind of quick? We hope to be able to review some of them a little bit more in depth.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm trying to do the questions and answers right now. So hopefully you guys are all able to see those. It takes us a little bit of time to get the recording back on these and to get the presentation ready to where we can ship it out. But once it's available, we'll make it available on our tag website so you guys can access it. And then also make sure that you guys are checking the webinar chat. You should be able to download a copy of the checklist. And then I also threw in there the 2 different links to the distributed wind and solar plus storage webinar.
Great. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. We have David Funk up next, and then Zachary, you'll be after him.
Yes, hello. Firstly, I want to say thank you to the USDA for running a program like this. I'm seeing a big impact in Eastern Washington where we work in Idaho. One comment is the $200,000 project carve out, that was a footnote. That is a wonderful aspect of this program. It really allows people with smaller projects to take the risk and the time and effort to apply. So I want to just highlight that is a great program. But with inflation, whether or not that could be increased to $25,000 to $30,000, that would be helpful. And then can the USDA facilitate a collaboration with other tag winners to share best practices? I think that we've done some good stuff here in Washington and Idaho, and can see an opportunity to share that.
Sure. So the first question was in regards to the set aside for 20,000 or less. That currently is a statutory provision, so you would need to go to your representatives to have them look into whether or not they want to change that provision. I know we've been seeing some comments on the Farm Bill, which is the main source of funding for REAP, in addition to IRA, and that is something that is being considered just due to inflation. And secondly, you asked about collaborations among other tag providers, and we can definitely give some thought to that because I do see value in that type of collaboration.
Thank you, Deb. David, I'm gonna go ahead and ask you to come off mute, and then Zachary, you're next, and Ryan, you're in the hall.
Sorry, I just answered my question. I think it's to Zach now. Thank you.
No problem. Zach?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
All right. Yeah, appreciate you taking the time to do this. We are interested in, we do most of our REAP applications for solar projects, but we are interested in using, incorporating more underutilized projects like wind. We were pretty happy about the fact that most solar projects do not require a feasibility study anymore. I was wondering, are most wind projects subject still to feasibility studies?
Yeah, that's a great question. And what I would say is we're going to have a distributed wind energy webinar on June 17th. And so we're going to prep that question for NREL. As long as, we get the information that we need in our application, to support the project development, the economic feasibility, the energy generation, all the key aspects of feasibility, then I would say that an independent third-party feasibility study would not be necessary. We require them if we don't get enough application information, or again, when the project provides greater risk, maybe you have multiple feedstocks, or different types of offtake arrangements that provide more risk. That's when we do for sure need those feasibility studies. So I will add that to my list of questions that we will send to NREL, and then we'll also make sure you guys all get those responses if you can't join that call on the 17th.
Great. Yeah, we do plan on attending that.
Great.
Thank you, Deb.
Right. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Zachary. Up next, we have Brad Morton, if you'd like to come off mute, sir, and then we have Ryan after that. Brian Morton, can you hear us, sir? Brad, excuse me. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and ask Ryan West to come on and ask your question, and then Brad, we'll get back to you.
Yes, sir. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. If you have an applicant that they want to do a project, they're approved for REAP, and they have to extend the capital. This is a reimbursement program, correct? Is there any case in which a advancement of capital would be considered? If it's a 50-50 program?
Right.
And
so for some of the larger applications, there's partial payout requests that we can do as the project progresses, but in general, we don't have just a full advance of the 50% in order to complete the project. So it'd be on a case-by-case basis, depending upon what you're doing.
Okay, thank you. The concern with some of we have a couple of people that are getting ready to submit applications. How long would they have to float interest if they're taking out financing from their lender or extend their reserves, and how long would they have to extend that capital before they get a reimbursement? So that's been a request from a couple of folks we've dealt with over the past 2 months, I would say.
Yeah, and I would say that since the IRA funding was released, the program has grown leaps and bounds, and the number of requests that we've been seeing has definitely increased. So the time frame that it's taking our staff to review applications has been a bit lagging. So the best solution that I can give to you guys as tag providers is to make sure that you are submitting complete applications, because if we get a complete application in, we can complete our environmental review, we can score it, we can get it ready to go. And that then goes through a funding competition much quicker than an application that is incomplete, missing information, and we need to go back and work it out with you. So I would just, again, encourage everybody to use that checklist and get complete applications in queue. And hopefully we'll be able to catch up on this backlog sooner rather than later.
Okay, thank you.
And I currently don't see any more hands raised. There are some questions in the Q&A. Did you want to? Oh, here we are. Real quick. We have Samuel Anderson. If you'd like to go ahead and pose your question.
Yes, it looks like I'm, am I muted now, or can you hear me?
I can hear you, sir.
Good, thank you. Yeah, I hadn't seen a response to my two questions in the Q&A yet, so I just wanted to make sure that I could get a response before we close the session. So my primary question, right now I have an applicant who is working on a bioenergy project that would bring in wood chips and convert some of it to biochar and some of it to heat their greenhouse. And so in burning or converting those chips to biogas and to biochar, it emits CO2. And so it caught my attention when I saw that projects that emit greenhouse gases are only eligible for up to 25% cost share. So it sounds like that project would fit in that category and not qualify for the full 50%. Is that correct?
Right. So that is correct. If your project produces greenhouse gases, it's not eligible for the 50%. However, if the project's located in a distressed or disadvantaged community, if the applicant entity is a tribal entity, then the project would qualify for 50%.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. All right, I think they should meet they're not a tribal government, but they should meet the distressed community qualification.
And if you want to send an inquiry to your state energy coordinator, we could vet that prior to a full application for you.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate it. And I just saw that the links to the webinars on wind energy were posted. That was my second question. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Samuel. We have Abby up next. If you'd like to go ahead and speak your question.
Thanks. So I just had a quick question about the one bullet point that was in there about writing grants for quote unquote your own company. So I work for the state. I manage a state grant program that's functionally very similar to REAP. But when I applied to this grant program, it was to have a third-party consultant help to provide the technical assistance work, and we're currently going out to bid for that consultant or qualified vendor list right now. So I was wondering, with our solicitation process, we're undergoing this qualified vendor list where, solar installers, wind installers, energy efficiency contractors, and the like can apply to be part of a list to provide technical assistance. Is it a violation of the rule for let's say an installer who is very experienced with helping folks fill out REAP applications to be filling out this application on behalf of a farmer, but they're ultimately going to be the ones installing it? Is that going against any rules here?
Yeah, so that would be defined as our conflict of interest, because that grant or that vendor would be writing the grant and also have a vested interest in completing the project and bidding the project. So that would be a conflict of interest. Now, they could do one or the other if they were going to bid the projects and somebody else was going to write the grant application. But we do see that sometimes.
Okay, so it would need to be a third party.
Correct.
Oh, that's unfortunate. Okay. Even though I, as the state agency and the awardee of the grant, am a third party from both of those other.
But they would be receiving funds to write the grant, right? So in essence, they're benefiting on both sides.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Abby. And I currently do not see any hands raised. Every time I say that, thank you. So I'm gonna go ahead and go to William. You'd like to go ahead and ask your question, sir?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and ask a question. And I don't know if this is just me or not, but because I've been working with this program for so long and all of the applicants that we have provided technical assistance on have been solar. As I've been going through this, I know that you guys have been talking about the webinar that's coming up on June 17th. I guess my follow-up question to that is, will there be other resources and continued education to help us provide assistance on these underutilized technologies? Because I, for one, am pretty unfamiliar with how those applications would go. I think that based on the question and answers on this webinar, I'm not the only one, but I'm just curious about what resources and supports we'll have moving forward.
Sure. Yes, there will be. So we've contracted with NREL to do a series of webinars as maybe like the first tranche to get information out there. We'll provide those recordings and those presentations online, either on USDA's website, or we'll have them hosted on an NREL website and link them to our website. In addition to that, we're looking at checklists that can be provided of what are the types of questions that need to be asked when you're doing a wind project or a biomass or geothermal. And then also linking to other resources that NREL has on, how these systems work. So that is definitely something that we are trying to pull together so that as a resource provider, you can point someone to a website for more information. And then once they have got excited and are ready to apply, they can come back to you for that assistance.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
All right, we're close to time here, but we have a few more questions. So I'm going to go ahead and ask Robin to go ahead and ask your question, and then Richard, you'll be after him.
All right, thanks so much. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, great. My question's about the ERR. You had shown a slide, and I do ERRs for some of my other projects. And I was wondering if there's because I had seen an actual environmental in the REAP application. And is that that's what stands, right? Because it asks for all of that in there. You're saying that has to, I thought that had to be in with the application, but you're saying it can be done after the initial acceptance of the application.
So I want to make sure I'm understanding your question correctly. You're asking if environmental information needs to be submitted with the application. Is that correct?
Yeah, with the initial application.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And then I wasn't sure. There should be. I think I found it in the ER application. But is there an official form for the ERR, like a checklist and whatnot, or is that coming?
Yeah. So there's not an official e-form for environmental information, but what we have is a checklist that will walk you through the different areas that need to be considered and ask specific questions so that we get the information that we need. So every application must have environmental information submitted in order for it to be considered complete. And then the agency goes through the process of determining and completing the environmental review. So the more information that's provided, again, depending upon the project, the faster the environmental review can be completed. But it is the agency that completes and finalizes the environmental review.
All right, thanks so much. I was just checking. I know that I just spoke with SHPO. A lot of in rural, there's a lot of historic buildings. And so we are finding that as soon as the applicant comes in, if you know that it's right to get with them to check the address and then work with them through the project, so that because they do have a 30-day turnaround time. So just throwing that out there. It's good to talk to them in the beginning and get that process started, because SHPO alone is a 30-day turnaround time.
Yeah, so if those types of resources need to be contacted, that is a valid statement that contacting sooner rather than later is always good. But again, it really depends on the project. If it's a project that isn't going to require that type of consultation, then it can be done in less than the 30 days.
Thanks so much.
Yep.
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and ask Richard, and then this will be our last question, folks.
Thanks. We are a solar contractor, Sunday Solar in Virginia, and we are working as a REAP tag grant provider. And I just wanted to make sure that I heard it correctly. If we are writing grants for, let's say, customers that we may or may not install in the long run, we will not be able to ask for reimbursement for the work associated with the grant for those customers. Is that correct?
Right. So if the plan is to write the grant and then also to complete the work, that's where the conflict of interest comes into play.
All right, because that's the first I've heard of that. I mean, you know, I always thought that there might be something funny going on, the fact that a solar installer could also get paid to write those grants. But I think that's something that hasn't been really made clear up until now, because the other REAP tag provider in our state is also a solar installer. So you really, yeah, that's news to me, quite a shock, quite honestly. And yeah, I appreciate the clarity. It's better to find that out now than, you know, a year from now.
Thank you, Richard. And since we're here, we might as well go to William. We have one more hand raised. Will, if you'd like to go ahead and take yourself off mute, sir.
I don't know if this is going to be helpful or not, but I do think that that's why the most recent round of tag money was specifically for more on the nonprofit side. I shared this with some of our state coordinators. I think that it's tough when they initially offered the technical assistance money for for-profit businesses, because I mean, you guys just went over this as well in the reimbursement section. We're getting reimbursed for costs for writing the grants, but we're not necessarily, at least we're not making any money off of providing our technical assistance. It's just something that covers our costs. And so I think I've heard this from a couple of people, just some feedback. I think if you guys are trying to go for providing that technical assistance and there's a conflict of interest for an installer that's potentially writing those grant applications as well, that would just be my input. I think that it's better if it stays in the nonprofit side rather than the for-profit side, because it's hard to not have a conflict of interest there.
Yes, you're spot on. That's why the tag 2 read the way it did.
Okay, we sparked some conversation. Devin, are you guys okay to hold on? We have a couple more questions if you'd like. I know we're got 10 minutes over, but is that okay with you?
I'm good.
All righty. Taylor Lee, if you'd like to come off mute, and then Abby, you'll be up next.
Okay, yes, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Excellent. So I actually just had just a question that I actually put in the Q&A, and then I also just wanted to give a suggestion for anyone of the for-profit businesses that are having issues because they are solar companies. My first question was, will the REAP tag recipients' contact information be added to each state's REAP page? So for instance, if we're serving New Jersey or Nebraska, will we be added as, you know, for those interested applicants to actually, just find us easily? Is my first question.
Yeah, so I thought we had a list of tag providers that we made available on the website. I'm not sure if we made it available on each specific state's website, but that's definitely something that we could provide to the state point of contacts to update their websites with.
We would love that, because one thing that we have heard from a lot of the applicants is they had no idea that we provided it. And so they reached out to the USDA and they kind of bombard them with questions. And that's what, we're here for, to kind of help them so that your offices aren't bombarded with all of those inquiries and things like that.
Yep.
And last thing is, for any of my for-profit companies, please feel free to reach out to me. My name's Taylor Lee on LinkedIn. So we can maybe possibly discuss if you have any issues with, if you're a solar company and you need help with, possibly figuring out how you can provide that technical assistance. But thank you guys so much. And this was a great webinar.
Thank you for attending.
Thank you, Taylor. Thank you, Deb. Abby, if you'd like to come off mute for us.
Yeah, so just going off of the conversation earlier with the for-profit businesses and conflict of interest, I was just wondering to what extent I can follow up with USDA folks offline, considering we are in a predicament if this is a conflict of interest, considering I'm a state agency, we are a state agency, we publish a solicitation twice, eliciting consultants, getting absolutely no responses from those consultants, from any consultants who would fill out. So we adjusted our proposal to go out to bid for, a qualified vendor list approach. And as a state agency, we cannot endorse or recommend anyone installer, but we do maintain installer lists who apply to certain renewable energy professionals lists, et cetera, here in our state. So I'm just looking for clarity on next steps as to what I need to do my due diligence to mitigate this conflict of interest, because we have a live solicitation that would essentially allow for a conflict of interest. So I just feel like I need to follow up with folks. So who would be best to do that with, and when?
Yeah, can you provide your name again, and I can make sure and reach out to you once we get the contact list from the webinar?
Sure. My name is Abigail Hasenfuss. I work for the Rhode Island Office of Energy Resources.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you, Abby. All right, I don't see any more hands raised. I'm gonna just hand it back over to the team here to wrap us up.
All right, this is Deb, and I want to let you know that I'm trying to answer these questions as fast as they come in. But if I don't get to the question that you put in the Q&A, we will email separately a list of, or email separately a response to your question. So you will get a response to that. And I just want to say thank you all for attending today's webinar and for the participation. And I will do the follow-ups on the few things that I mentioned that I would do. And I will turn it over to Brenda.
Thank you, Deb, and thank you for assisting in all of those questions and answers. And I too thank you for the participating today in today's webinar. Please look forward to the additional NREL trainings that are coming. And if there are any other future trainings like this, we will reach out to you like we did on this one and invite you. And we'll end today's call. Thank you, everyone, and have a great day.